All right, I think it's time to get started. So, welcome everybody. As you can see in the name of the stream and then the name of my PowerPoint, today's topic is going to be defense. So, it's an exciting topic. It's a big part of the game. I already talked about. Hi, Churro. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate having you here. So, uh, So today's topic is going to be on defense, and so yeah, let's get started. So the first thing is I want to make sure we all have an agreed upon definition of what defense is. So in Scrabble, the goal is to outscore your opponent, which is defense is your favorite. Oh, great. Well, that's good. All right. So in Scrabble, the goal is to outscore your opponent, right? So that's pretty obvious, but sometimes you might lose track of that. And this can be done in one of two ways, or obviously a mixture of the two, but there are basically two main ways to try to outscore your opponent. You can try to make your own plays score better, or you can try to make your opponent's plays score less. And this isn't specific to Scrabble, of course. I mean, the same thing would apply to, basketball, soccer, anything. I mean, you can try to win the game in more than one way. You can go for a defensive victory where your opponent scores very little, or you can go for an aggressive offensive victory where you score very much. So in terms of Scrabble, when we're considering making defensive plays, what we're looking at is how much it scores. Sorry, how much the sort of more aggressive offensive play is going to score versus like how much you sacrifice to make a defensive play, and then how much you sacrifice to make that defensive play versus how much is that going to limit your opponent's options. So in general, I would say that Scrabble is going to be a game that lends itself towards a lot of paranoia and defense. And the reason for that is because there, anytime you set something up, so anytime you actually open something or you choose not to block something, your opponent's always going to have first crack at it. So, um, so Scrabble is going to lend itself more towards like a more paranoid, like blocky sort of like type of play that's like good. And so in that sense, it's going to be a little bit more like, say, a poker tournament compared to like a cash game, because in a poker tournament, if you don't have a lot of chips, you're often going to be very worried about just surviving a little bit longer to try to outlast like one or two more people to get a pay jump. And so in Scrabble, we're going to be very paranoid because at any time we open up a spot on the board, our opponent will always get first crack at it. So it's going to lead ourselves to want to do quite a bit of defense. So let's talk about ahead versus behind. So a lot of defensive things are going to be mostly for if you're ahead, and the reason for that is because if you're ahead, the type of defense you're going to play is going to be basically about limiting your opponent's bingos. If you're ahead 50, you can probably outrun a couple of 30-point plays by your opponents, but you won't be able to necessarily outrun their bingos. And then there are other parts of this. So like maybe you're up like 20 and you have to block a 40-point play. You might see that too. And then when you're behind, a lot of the defense is going to be relegated to blocking the big scoring spots because you want the bingo lanes open because you're going to need a bingo or two to win. So if you're behind, the best thing you can do defensively is going to be to block your opponent's big scoring spots so that if you get that bingo down, it will actually be enough to win. And so it's very important to consider the game score when you're making your plays, right? Okay, so I guess the most basic form of defense is just going to be like the direct like blocking a spot on the board. And so this is hi, the Truth Main. Thank you for coming. I got a banger for today. I think it's about defense. So when you block a spot, you make it so that it cannot be used, which is fairly obvious. That's coming up. Yeah, I have that. Yeah, that's similar. So I'm talking about sort of like blocking an S hook by playing under it or over it or something. As opposed to like if you don't have the S, you can only block the spot. You can't use it. That's sort of what I mean. So when you block a spot, you make it so that it cannot be used, which is obvious. Your opponent is always a favorite to hit the spot. If it's your turn and you can't hit the spot, then from your perspective, you know your opponent is the only one who can hit the spot in terms of like in the next turn. So they're going to have first crack at it if from your perspective, you don't have a place to use it. So when you block it, you're preventing a juicy lane from being used that your opponent is going to be more likely to be able to hit. So this is probably going to be a good idea if it's a juicy spot, because if your opponent's a favorite to hit that spot, then you want to block it, right? So let's see. Okay, so exhaustion is the next thing, and I actually have, I think, 3 examples from actual tournament games that I played that illustrate this point. So we're gonna be taking a field trip to Quackle very soon, which is very exciting. So exhaustion means making the board such that no bingo will ever play, which means that the board is really sort of. Will I cover partial blocking? Sort of. Exhaustion does not have to be the entire board, right? So there's partial blocking in the form of partial exhaustion, right? And I would say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say exhaustion is going to be a little bit more common in CSW, because there's more hooks in CSW, there's more words, there's more hooks, and this sort of spirals into it being harder to block the board by just blocking the spots one at a time, because it'll be easier to fork the board. It'll be harder to come back if you make a scoring play instead of a blocking one. So a lot of the time in Collins, there's going to be more exhaustion when we think about defense. And then in TWL, there's going to be a little bit more of like blocking each play one at a time. And then the most common form of exhaustion is going to be to make a long parallel play across another long word in maybe row 7, 8, or 9, or columns GHI. This will make it very hard for an entire section of the board for either a vertical or a horizontal bingo to come down, depending on how you do it. So I'll just show like, I'll try to show a basic example in Quackle of this sort of concept. So see, we can ignore this for now. Just ignore this game for now. But you know, let's say I opened with the word Alameda and I play it here, which I wouldn't recommend. But and then let's say our opponent has ditones, and they play ditones right here. Well, it's already going to be very difficult to get a vertical bingo down, like here, right, or here, or here, or here, and we already have 7 rows of board where it's almost impossible, because 9s are pretty rare, right? Right? So we already got 9 rows, or 7 rows out of 15 where it's, or 7 columns where it's going to be very hard to get a bingo down vertically. So that's a really big part of the board, and so ditones is an example of a play that seeks to exhaust the board. Now let's take this a little bit further, and let's put down let's put down a 9-letter word ending in AD on the board. Oh look, let's look. Is there a way to do that with Oh, I don't. Yeah, okay. So let's put Jesniriad. Thank you, Alec. Let's put Jesniriad on the board, even though it's probably not the best play. Right? And then let's see. And then let's put the word Ilial on the board right here. Well, now at this point, it's already difficult to get a vertical bingo down through this section of the board. Now it's difficult to get a horizontal bingo down over here, right? And so even though there's only like 4 plays on the board, we're already get to the point where the board is starting to get really exhausted looking. And so if you're ahead, you want the board to sort of look like this and make it look like it's just hard to get any sort of bingo down ever. Now, obviously, this board is not exhausted. It's not particularly close. We can still get a 7 right here with Alamedas. We could definitely get some vertical bingos over here and some horizontal ones over here. But this is a lot more exhausted than a board is usually going to be after 2 turns each. And so, yeah, and Chesneriad takes no less. But no, I get the point you're making, Alec. I'm not trying to say this board is like completely exhausted, but it's a lot more exhausted than you would usually see on a board after 4 turns. So I was just showing this as a quick example of what a exhausted board is going to look like. If we wanted to continue this, we could just put some more parallel plays down. Like, let's say we put the word lifeline on the board, and then somebody plays, I don't know, the word like faxed here. Well, that takes away a lot of the horizontal bingos on the bottom, right? And then if somehow, let's say we played something like this, right? And then just anything. Well, like let's consider the board state now. Look at it. Like look at it now. Like where do you bingo other than Alamedas? That's 1. That it's not tied. It's 208 to 202. Oh, before faxed. Oh, after faxed. Okay. Yeah. So now there's 47 unseen tiles. So the game is going to be approximately a little under half over. And yet there's only 2 bingo lanes. There's basically just the C, and then there's Alamedas, and then there's lanes for 9s, and that's a lot like less likely to bingo. Like let's just run a random sim. So I'm going to run a random sim, and we're going to specify the partial opponent rack as the blank, and we are going to give ourselves QIS as an option, and we're going to look at how likely our opponent is to bingo, given that they have a blank. And let's see, I'm going to sim it. And I'm getting the wrong output. But I think that given that our opponent has a blank, they might still only bingo something like 40 or 50% of the time. And that's if they see all the 9s. So this is an example of an exhausted board because even if you wanted to open a bingo line, you really can't. The only hope you might have is to play like a short word starting with a C, but that's easily blockable. So if you're behind, you really don't want to be on this board. And if you're ahead, you really want to be on this board because it's very hard to open. It's almost impossible to get a bingo down. So this is an example of exhaustion, a basic example that's very contrived. And now we're going to look at some examples from actual games that I played in tournaments. So let's see. Let's get cracking. So this is a game that I played against Vince Castellano, and this was 2 years ago in Ottawa. And I am currently ahead by 41 points. And I have this rack. It's not the greatest. We got IIINOPS, right? And if you can't see the pool because it's a little small, the unseen tile pool is blank AAAAA. EEEEEEGHLNOORTY. So I'll type that into the chat. So this is So that's the unseen tile pool, and there's a couple of what I want you to notice is that there are basically two main bingo lines for Vince to go for on this board, right? He needs to bingo because he's behind, so his options are basically this line down here, which is for bingo starting with an R. RE specifically, because of this R here and the fact that R only takes E as a hook. And then we have this line with Boffos. And so in this position, I make a play that I don't think a lot of people would make, but I think it's the best play. And so I make this play of Boffos. And it looks interesting, right? I mean, I'm literally just dropping my S for 16. Right? So I play the word Boffos. I don't know what that is. Is it a monkey or something? What is a Boffo? It's a hearty laugh. Okay. So I make this very interesting play called Boffo. Well, I am going for Sinopia. That's the thing. I actually am going for Sinopia. But I can't play Sinopia if Vince bingos right away, right? And there's a good chance that Vince can actually get a pretty decent scoring bingo off of Boffos. But if I put the S down, he's relegated to a bingo that scores only like 62. And if he doesn't bingo, there's an over 50-50 chance that on my next turn, I can play Sinopia. So I actually am fishing for Sinopia, but not as a bingo. And the thing is, when you're ahead, you can do stuff like this. You don't have to fish for a bingo that will put you way, way over the top. Because I'm ahead, I just have to avoid disaster scenarios. So when I play Boffos, I'm already going to be up by 57. And a lot of Vince's bingos are going to start with this S, and they're going to score only like 60. And then they're going to give me the triple. And then another option, which is what ends up happening, is that I draw Sinopia. Vince doesn't bingo. Well, now I'm going to play Sinopia, and the thing to note is this is going to score 20 points, so it's going to put me up by 58. So even if Vince gets a bingo to the R at this point, I get first crack at the triple. So I can probably win. Because I get first crack at the triple if Vince plays to the R. And if Vince plays a play on this triple, he's blocking his own spot with the R. So if I play Sinopia and then Vince plays something like Area, well, he just blocked his own R. Now the board is completely dead. He's down 40, and he can't do anything. So this is a great example of board exhaustion because I managed, there's only really two big lines, but I got rid of them as best I could with the tiles that I had. So this play of Boffos, I think, is really interesting because I don't think a lot of people would make this play. But I do think it is the best play, even though it's very counterintuitive. You know, it keeps 3 I's and it dumps the S and it only scores 16. But I actually think that Boffos is the best play because it's my best shot at working towards an exhausted state on the board, which is really the best I can hope for because I don't have an E. So I can't, if I had an E, then I would be able to just, in 2 turns, I could do something about Boffos and something down here, and the board would just be completely dead, and I would just coast to victory. But I don't have an E, so I can't do that. So I go for the play of Bothos with the idea of fishing for Sinopia down here, or Sinope, and then 2 turns later, the board should be completely dead and I'll be ahead. And if Vince does have a bingo down that S, well, it now only scores like 60 instead of like 75, and that's a lot more manageable given the current score. So, can I see in the comments? Does everybody understand why I think Bothos is the best play? That's a good one. That's actually the definition of Yankee, Y-A-N-K-E-E in Collins is the letter Y in the NATO alphabet, and then the definition of Y-A-N-Q-U-I is like the typical like New England or Yankee thing. Yeah, it's weird. We can do the definition. That's like a, you know, New Englandy Yankee, and then that is just the letter Y for the NATO phonetic alphabet. So yeah. No, it's not a Latino. It's the Latin American term for an American of any race, I think. Okay, cool. So this is one great example of board exhaustion. So now we're going to take a look at a play where I make a bad play and I don't go for board exhaustion. So this is a game I played against Noah Slatkoff, who is in the chat right now, which is cool. And I have this rack, AILMNRT. And I'm up by 97 right now, so I have a good lead. And one thing to notice about this board is that this entire half of the board is basically already exhausted. So if I can exhaust the vertical bingos over here and then a couple horizontals down here, as well as this snaw hook, I can basically get to the point where the board is completely dead. So I make this sort of standard play of mail, which I think is a terrible idea because I don't need to fish. And I know mail isn't a fishing play, but it's a rack balancing play, so it kind of is like on the side of being a fish play. So I think that the best play is going to be mitral, which in the immediate sense, it blocks this lane with ukes, and then this lane with the S down here, and then this lane with the F. And it also makes, once we get like a parallel play down here, it makes it very hard to do a horizontal bingo over here. And so I really just have to worry about snaw afterwards. Well, I mean, it keeps NRT. NRT is pretty good. I would call that a rack balancing play. I know, obviously, I could also just play Joel and fish, but I don't think that's what I need to be doing right now. So yeah, I think mitral is the best play. I think it loses like less than 1% of the time, regardless of what Quackle says. I think this play will lose less than 1% of the time, and I think mail will lose maybe 2 or 3% of the time. And as it turns out, I came very close to losing because I did not play mitral. So that is a great example of a time where I made a mistake and I didn't exhaust the board when I should have. So that's a good example. It's good to look at your mistakes and try to learn from them. And this is a mistake I did. I defaulted towards a sort of an equity-ish play when I could make a very good defensive play instead, even though it's a big equity sacrifice. I mean, it's actually a 15-point equity sacrifice, but it doesn't really matter here because the big thing is I have to prevent Noah from bingoing to try to come back, and the best way to do that is on an exhausted board, because if the board is exhausting, there will never be a bingo. So I think that this is a good example of a mistake I made by trying to make sort of the standard play that a lot of like the rank and file 2000 players would play. But I'm not a rank and file 2000 player. I'm like a good thinking player. So I think I think I'm capable of playing Mitral instead of Male, and I think in the future I will be able to make plays like this. Yeah, that's why. Ramtil has a red hook and the eared hook. Does Mitral take an S? I mean, I would still do it. Oh, it's Mistral. That's right. Okay. I was getting it confused. So, yeah. So, I think that Mitral is by far the best play here. So, mistake and a good learning opportunity for that one. So, we are going to look at one more game where I show an interesting example of exhaustion. So here I'm playing Dan Blake, and I have this rack of D, D, E, E, N, T, T, and so I do not make the equity play. I have multiple options that have a much higher equity. I could play Do. I could play Don. I could play Toe, Yad. And all those plays, they sort of don't open anything. And this board is very closed right now. So you might think that not opening anything is a good thing, but if you look a little bit deeper, what we're going to notice is that there's this lane here on row 10, and it's actually pretty scary. Because this, you might dismiss this immediately, but it's for plays ending in ST. There are a lot of words that end in ST. There are a lot of words that end in well, Do is not a fishing play. Do is a waiting move, not a fish. I don't think it's the best play, but if this jam were replaced with a word that doesn't take an S, I would have played Dawn. I would have played Dawn if jam doesn't take an S. Just to be clear, if this jam were replaced by something that didn't take an S, I would play Dawn because the board becomes a lot less scary. So this is, just tell me in the chat, do you remember my video on recursion from a couple weeks ago? Did you watch the VOD on YouTube or the Twitch stream the next day, or maybe even in the moment? Do you remember my video on recursion? You were there. Great. I was there. You remember. Churro remembers. Awesome. Well, you participate in that raid. Awesome. So this is a great example of recursion. If I play Dawn here, I also might not block it next turn. I also might not block it the turn after that. And this spot might stay open for a very long time. And every time the spot stays open, Dan, who can have any of 3 S's and 1 blank, gets shots at bingos ending in ST. And there are a decent amount of those. And I'm ahead. So I would rather block it. So I end up making this play detuned. And you might be saying, wait, aren't you opening the board? How is that defense? And it's right. I mean, I am sort of opening the board. Like, depending on his rack, he could get a 7 right here. He could get a 7 right here. He could maybe even get an 8 right here. And he actually will probably score more in the immediate sense if I play detuned. But the reason why I'm okay with this is because in the long term, the board is going to look very ugly after a couple of parallel plays. Once you look at what actually happened in this game, which we're going to look at, he plays anus down here, and then I play pin to block this. Then he fishes and I play Vita. Well, now look at the board, right? I think, what, is spat a word? I guess that is. No, it's not. It's not. Never mind. It's not a word. Okay, so that's not even a word. So there's already no place to bingo here unless he can somehow get a bingo with like an F as like a late letter, or maybe like something with pine or pint. But now, like, all of a sudden, just a couple turns later, the board is almost completely dead, and I'm up like 70. And yeah. So it's important in Scrabble to sort of think a couple turns ahead in situations where you think you can control the outcome, because detuned looks like a board opening play. But in reality, I'm actually thinking about long-term defense with this play, and it's very important to notice that the reason why I do detuned is because of the negative recursion aspect of this line here with ST. So let's say that this T was replaced with an N, and that the resulting made-up word didn't take an S. Well, in that case, I have a lot less to worry about because it's not super likely to bingo through a U. And in any case, he doesn't have... I know, the E. I know it would be ALI. Let's just pretend that this T is an N and this made-up word takes no hooks for the purely hypothetical sense. Well, what am I going to do? Well, I don't really need to do anything. I can just sort of sit here, make like 8-point plays like Don, and just sort of wait for Dan to do something, because I don't need to do anything. And maybe I'll play Den next turn. Like, I can just sort of sit still, look pretty, and just wait for a board opening play that I would block. And when you're ahead, you can do that, because the person who's behind is the one that needs to make something happen in order for them to have a chance. But I'm ahead in this case, so I can just sort of wait. So those are all examples of recursion, breaking the recursion, and then board exhaustion. So we will, yeah. I mean, he might be able to. Oh, you did look at 5 plus. Okay, yeah. So yeah, he can't do anything if that T is an N, and we're pretending that word takes no hooks. So in that case, there's a lot less recursion to kill, and I would end up making a play like Don, because I don't need to force anything to happen. But I was getting scared of this bingo line, which, if I don't do anything about, it'll become an issue turns down the road. So I decided to sort of protect myself by just playing detuned and dealing with it right away. So does everybody get that? Please, I want some participation in the chat. Does everybody see why I played detuned? Josh, would you have played or Alec or Noah, would you play detuned here? I want to make sure I might have, see if I have some like top experts in agreement. Would you play detuned here? How do I start a poll? How do I do a poll in this thing? No. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna release a poll. I figured it out. All right. I'll do a poll. Okay. Yeah. So put detuned, tunded, dawn, and then exchange as the options. This is good. I didn't even think about this till now. This is a great way to be more interactive. So we're gonna do a poll, and the options are gonna be detuned, tunded, and exchange. So you have it. Do you have it yet, Emmett? Is it coming out at some point? Okay. No, I'd rather do a poll like this. I don't like tunded because it's harder to block without making a big play. And it allows more bingos in the immediate term because you just need to fit one parallel. Okay. All right. We will post this poll when the next poll dies. How much longer? Okay. I get kicked off of Twitch for that. I don't know. Anyways. Yeah, I know. If only denutted or something was a word and we could just forget all this crap. Right? Okay. Can I get it off? Oh, okay. End poll. Okay. Daunted? I don't have that. I can't play that. Okay, I got it. I got the poll set up. Alright. So. Alright, you got 4 options. Vote for me. Everybody vote. So, we got Detuned. We got Tunded. We got Dawn. And we got just some sort of exchange. Like, maybe exchange DET. I don't know. And it looks like I'm voting for Detuned. It looks like we got 2 votes for Dawn. I don't hate Dawn. And like I said, I would play Dawn if... Do I get to see who voted for what? I don't hate Dawn, and I would play it if this ST lane weren't a thing. But I think that the ST lane is too great of a risk, and I just do it now. So if you want to tell me who voted for Dawn, I'm curious because I don't hate that play. The Truth main, okay. Yeah, I don't hate that play. And Jongjin, cool. Okay, yeah, I don't think Dawn is like a terrible play. I just think that we might as well block while we can, especially considering. I guess I didn't show this, but Dan's last play was OIS, which makes it slightly more likely. I'm not up enough where like. I'm not up enough, and it's not close enough to the end of the game where I would be like, oh, well, if he bingos and I get the triple, then I'm fine. Because I'm not fine. I'm only up... I'm actually only up, like... I'm only up 44 after playing Detuned, so... Another thing to consider is that Dan's last play was OIS, which makes it a little bit more likely that he has an S. It's definitely not guaranteed, because that's a pretty monster play on that board, but yeah... I mean, your options through the U are basically Detuned, Nutted, Tunded, Duet, and that's basically it. Yeah, you could do something like Und. That might be another option. It does have Undy, and it doesn't exhaust the board. There are a couple disaster scenarios with hooks Dan can play up there, but yeah, Und is another option. That might be a good choice. The leave isn't great, and there are going to be some issues if Dan makes a play like of, whereas Detuned can lead to a much... And then there's Undy. So I actually also like Und. I don't know. Yeah, the exhaustive approach is to play on both sides, but the exhaustive approach might not be best here because the board is pretty locked down after Und, right? I think Und might be right up there with Detuned. The issue after Und is not necessarily Undy because everything sets something up. But it would be more a play like, let's see if some... Yeah, it would be more a play like this where eventually Dan is going to play something like this, and then if I use the triple, he can get something through the O, which will be very hard to block. Yeah, Undy and Under. I guess in this case, I'd probably avoid Und because it keeps a really bad leave, and we're still only up like 40. So we do actually have to think about we do have to think about that as well. But yeah, so I don't know. I like detuned. I also like undi or und. But I think an exhaustive approach is going to work a little better here because the board is openable, and let's just sim to see their opponent's bingo chances, because it will be lower in the long term after detuned. That's weird that it. Oh, I specified a blank. Okay. I do think detuned is better because of a better long term. But and I guess Quackle's saying detuned this time, but I think the biggest issue with und is that you get to some nasty situations down the road where there might be a play on the triple like this that creates a spot that's annoying to block, or maybe it's a parallel play here, and then after detuned, there's an interesting property where if Dan makes a play like, I don't know, just anything like this, then I can make a play like this, and they sort of block each other. And obviously it's the S hook, which is something, but that's, I mean, this is pretty locked down, right? And I'm still up pretty comfortably. So for all those reasons, I think detuned is the best play here, but I'm definitely far from convinced. I can see the argument for something like Dawn to just sort of wait and see. And so, yeah. So this was a really cool game. I'm really happy I had the opportunity to play a play like Detuned, because I think it's a really underappreciated part of the game. And so yeah, I went for Detuned. So yeah. Okay. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. We're going to talk about opening with an exchange. So doesn't look like it, but this is a form of defense. A lot of people think in order to be a defensive, you actively have to do something. But in this case, we're going to do nothing when the alternative to nothing is guaranteed to open up the board. So let's take a peek at an open with an exchange. So this is a real life actual game that I played against Tim Weiss. And this was my opening rack. And I exchanged my I, just my I. And my options are basically going to be exchanging the I, exchanging the I and the O, and then either OI or IO. So these are our options. We got OI right here. We got exchange IO, keeping AI and RT. And then we got exchange I. And I'm not sure which is better. The sim I did earlier preferred exchange I. But the big thing here is I want to notice I want you to notice the big difference in sim between OI and exchange IO specifically, because these two plays are basically variants of each other. OI plays off the O and the I, obviously. And exchange IO also plays off the O and the I. And OI scores 4 points, and exchange IO scores 0. So if the only information you had was that, you would probably expect OI to be a better play. Oh shit, I'm not in Quackle. Okay. This is the rack. We've got AII, NORT, and we're looking at exchange I versus exchange IO versus OI. And we're going to take a peek, and it looks like if we just exchange the I, we're going to bingo 77% of the time on our next turn. If we exchange the I and the O, we're going to bingo 65% of the time. And if we play OI, we're going to bingo 54% of the time. And the reason for that is because a lot of our opponents' plays are going to be 3-letter words. Like if we play OI, our opponent's going to play a 3-letter word like here. It's going to be somewhat hard to bingo with a consonant. You've heard only play a 4-point opener if it's low. I think it's a little more marginal if it starts with a consonant, because then you don't have to slot a vowel in a double letter. So I think it's a lot closer. But the general principle is that opening short is going to be about 3 points or maybe even 4 points worse than exchanging inherently, and that's because of what playing on your first turn does to the board. If you play on your first turn, you're going to give your opponent access to a nice parallel play with the double letters. They get the triple lane. They get 2 floaters to make 8-letter words. They get access to the triple letter score. And if you open long, they might get access to a double-double, another double lane. And that's all really nice compared to just the single double lane you get if you play. So almost always. Okay, and at this point, the sim is heavily favoring Exchange I. So this is a great example of what I think is a little counterintuitive. But this is a form of defense because we're lowering our opponent's average score. So in this situation, it looks like our opponent's going to average 31.6 points if we exchange and 33.9 if we play OI. So that's a big difference. And this is a form of defense. And you might be saying, yeah, but that's not 4, and it's not. But the thing is, we're going to have better options playing just right after our opponent's play because we want as many floaters as possible to try to get an 8 on the board. And the board's going to look a lot uglier for a bingo rack after we open with OI and get hit with a parallel play, especially a consonant-heavy one, where a lot of the hooks are going to be vowels. Like, if we play something like OI, our opponent is likely to get a play down, like, I don't know, maybe bog. And then at this point, let's say we have something like cantrip on our rack. In this case, it plays, but I'm sure I could contrive a situation where we would end up with an unplayable bingo. I can't show that. I could show it, but it's in a. If you run a sim and you click on details, you'll see it, but it doesn't show up on the stream. I would have to show a different window, which I can if you want. I can try to get it to work. Let's see. No, it doesn't show up, unfortunately. It's a pop-up that doesn't show up as a separate window, unfortunately. But yes, so Exchange I is probably the best play here. And this is a good example of defense. It doesn't look like defense because we're literally doing nothing. But it is defense because if we do anything, we're setting up our opponent. So by exchanging, we're actually lowering our opponent's opening score. So let's do a poll. Let's see. After all that I said, what does everybody prefer? All right. Everybody answer the poll. Vote, please. I just want to see what we're thinking. So I'm gonna vote for Exchange I. And we're gonna see what everybody else thinks. And it looks like we got 4 votes now, and everybody's saying Exchange I, which is good. That's what I think. I think Exchange I is the best play, but okay, cool. So yeah, it looks like at least out of the 4 people that voted, we like Exchange I, which is good. I like Exchange I too. You might just play through it and blitz as a hate. Yeah, I'd hope you would at least think about it a little harder. And I think you can add sort of a general rule to your head, Alec, that you just don't open with a 4-point, 2-vowel, 2-letter word. I think you should just add that as a general rule to your head. Just don't do it. Exchange the 2 if you're thinking of doing that, because if it is ever wrong, it's wrong such little amount of time that by defaulting to this, you won't be making a big mistake. Okay, cool. So that is opening with an exchange. It is a form of defense, even though it doesn't look like one, because you are doing absolutely nothing to the board. But it is a form of defense because it's in a situation where every single play, if you actually put letters on the board, you're going to do something bad to the board and give your opponent more opportunity. So that's a good example of defense that doesn't actually look like it, okay? And we're actually going to look at another example of defense that seems like you're not actually doing anything. And that is the concept of a waiting move. So a waiting move is when you're ahead on an already very closed board, you don't need to make anything happen. Like, you don't have to force things because any play that opens the board will immediately give your opponent opportunities. And your opponent should have to provide themselves with those opportunities because they're behind. They're the one that needs to force things. So why would you do it yourself? So oftentimes with a waiting move, if we have a decent or a good rack, we're going to try to play off the weakest tile on our rack for maybe 5 to 10 points. And if we have a bad rack, we might just go for an exchange. And the reason why waiting moves are so strong are because if and when your opponent decides to open the board, you might be able to bingo. You might be able to just block off the board again immediately, depending on what you have. And both of those are going to be a very bad thing for your opponent. The important thing to remember is your opponent is the one that needs to force things, not you, because they can't just pass. If they pass, you can just pass back and instantly win the game via the 6-pass rule. So we're going to look at a game, and I've actually shown these plays before, but since they also fit here, I'm sure not everybody on the stream has seen the moves because I have shown them a few times, but not that many times. So we're gonna hang on. I'm having issues again getting Quackle to show up. See if we can get Quackle to show up. Shoot. Let's see. Yeah, I know. I'm clicking a lot. Not ideal. Okay, there we go. So we're in this position, and we're up by 22. And I'm just going to do a poll ahead of time to see where people are at. So we're going to ask, I'm going to offer a couple different plays. So we're going to say, what are we doing here? And we will offer a few different options. So, yeah, so I have to do the poll, and then here are the options. So it's basically didn't, if I offered that, Tinder, wed, and then when. So we got, let's see, everybody please vote. I wanna see where everybody's at. Please vote. Okay. Cool. So it looks like we've got 1 vote for wed, 2 votes for wed, as well as my vote for wed, which is good because wed is the move I ended up making. And I believe it's the best play. So Alec is saying wed is better than when because I end both at 9I and H8. Yeah, so that was my rationale behind when was the font wed was the font hook. I also think I just draw more bingos. Even if Dean doesn't do anything to board, If I play Wed, I can draw Greenlit. I can draw Virulent. I can draw Inertial. And I can draw Tingler. And those are all play on a pretty dead board where there aren't that many options to bingo. If I play When, I can draw not much. I don't even know if I can draw a single bingo with one tile. Can I? Let's check. I don't think I can actually draw a single bingo. Yeah, I can't draw a single bingo if I play Wed. If I play When and Dean. Gristle's not a word, so yeah, I cannot play a single bingo if Dean doesn't open the board here. So the reason why I'm going with When here is because, or sorry, Wed, which is what I ended up doing, is, well, at least compared to When, I'm fishing for bingos, which is a good thing, because I obviously don't want to open the board, but a bingo's a bingo. And then, as opposed to a play like Din, well, Din sort of does everything you don't want to do when you're ahead. If I play Din, Dean has access to this T-hook for Dint, or G, or E, or O, or S, or maybe I'm missing something. So he has access to this 7 lane with all kinds of random hooks. And then he has access to this spot for both IDS and ID. He can maybe end in like ET, EN, ES. Blank K, yeah, he could do a blank K too. And so that's just basically, it does score better. And in fact, it has better equity, but I'm not that likely to bingo because lead's not amazing. And I am very likely to bingo after, or not very, but I'm pretty likely to bingo, like decently. I mean, I can draw like maybe 20 something tiles. So I might even have like a 1/3 chance of bingoing if I play Wed and Dean does nothing. So that's very good. And then there's variants of it. Like Dint is a little bit less. It scores 1 more point and it's a little bit less crazy because Dint takes less hooks, but it still does everything you don't want to do when you're ahead. Now, even if I want to block on my next turn, it's like I can't really, because I'm just gonna set up a new lane. I can't really block, and I'm forking the board because there's 2 lanes. Since Fawn doesn't take an S, there's no way to block both of these at one time. So every single play, and then Tinder's even worse because it sets up this triple lane. So I'm not doing that, obviously. Yeah, Tind we can think of too. But Tind has some of the same problems. Like instead of an E, this is an A, which is obviously less likely, but we still have an A hook and an S hook, and then we have an S hook over here. And so we're just not really doing what you want to be doing when you're ahead. And harder to use also means harder to block for me. So I can only deal with this if I have an A, which I don't currently have. Like, I can only deal with this lane that results from Tind if I have an A, which I don't have. So that I just don't like any of these plays that sort of open the board, which is why I end up doing Wed. So this is a good example of a waiting move because I'm not really accomplishing anything besides scoring a few points, but I still think it's the best play. So then on my next turn, I bite the bullet a little bit and I play Fawn because I have a duplicate N. And we see a similar situation where this time I'm opening up the board a little bit, so it's not a pure waiting move. But my only real pure waiting moves would either be to exchange the N or maybe something like this, which is terrible because they'll leave. So then my other option is In, which again, it does everything you don't want to do when you're ahead. It forks the board. It creates a really juicy line because he only has to make 1 parallel instead of multiple. gives him this S hook, which is hard to deal with, and so I don't like it. But I think in this case, Fawn is okay because I'm just so likely to bingo if he gets a bingo here, and it scores 7 as opposed to 0, and maybe I even get lucky and draw N trail or something. And I think I kind of just have to bite the bullet and do it. It might be better to exchange the N. I'm not sure. Yeah, Fawn doesn't take an S. I would not have. I would have exchanged an N if Fawn took an S. I would have definitely exchanged my N if Fawn took an S. But because it doesn't, I thought it was just worth it, just barely worth it. And I'm not sure. We could try simming it. I don't think Quackle will do the right things here, but we can try. I do think that Fawn will over sim compared to exchange N, but I also think that, yeah, I don't know. It might be better to exchange the N. I'm not sure. Quackle's not going to do it right anyways. So, yeah, Fa means fall, and then Fawn means fallen. So, yeah, it does not take an S. Although I think, does fallen take an S? No, it's not. Okay. Anyways, that's it for today. I think I might have one more slide, but that's going to be it for today. So, yeah, using a scoring spot. One way to block it is to use it. The reason why I included this separately is sometimes you're going to get a situation where there's an obvious scoring spot and your best play is actually somewhere else. But if you use the obvious scoring spot, your opponent can't. Your opponent can probably use the obvious scoring spot with most of their range. And so, yeah, there are going to be situations where you might want to, say, use up a triple word scorer with your X instead of like a triple letter combo, even though the triple word score will score a little bit less. So that's why I include this separately. But yeah, anyways, that's it for tonight. I just want to say thank you everybody for showing up. We had a decent turnout by my standards tonight, so I had a great time. I hope everybody had a great time. I really like the polling thing. I'm definitely going to continue doing that as I ask you what you think the best play is. So yeah. And if anybody has any ideas for a stream, please just either comment them right now in the chat or just message me with them. I'm starting to run out of ideas. So, yeah, thank you for watching, Churro. I hope you enjoyed it. So, yeah. Any ideas for streams? If not, I'm just going to head out. All right. Well, have a great night, everybody, and I'm gonna just check to see if there's someone to raid. All right, we can raid CL Smith. I'll raid CL Smith. How to use Quackle? Yeah, we can do that. All right, I'll do that next time, Churro. Alrighty, let's raid. Cool. All right, have a nice night, everyone.